I think this is all going is a bit dystopian. Because the questions that you then have to ask yourself, what the heck do you need actors for? If you have an AI that can make faces, I'm like, I might just sit here and say I need a 28-year-old male of that complexion with this attitude, with a big scar on their right eyebrow.
Where do you think that
talking
is?
about this? Oh no, make the nose bigger. Oh no, make them. It's very hard to say that it's that easy, but extrapolating that we were at like clunky images that were really hard to make by a bunch of nerds on Colab to Midjourney in like a year and a half. It's very hard. It's very hard to say.
All right, so we are here with Johannes. Johannes is a visual effects artist and technologist, I suppose, and also a contributor to visual effects in a number of ways. How long have you been working in the industry?
Goodness, probably around 18 years. Yeah, cool. I think my first job was like in 2004. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so he's like a hardcore veteran, I would say, in terms of visual effects years. But also, I think it's just going to be interesting conversation because he's also been experimenting with AI, integrating that into Nuke, and also, those kind of topics that are adjacent to visual effects that maybe not necessarily, on this channel. What I've been doing so far in Compositing Academy has been really kind of focused directly on compositing and like techniques and stuff like that. But I think it's worth thinking about the future. And whenever you're talking about the future, this is somewhat speculative. It's like, nothing, so this is going to be on video. So it'll be interesting to see how this holds up, or the acceleration of how things change over time, or how quickly they come. But those are the general things that I'm kind of interested in kind of touching on this conversation, is just where we think things are going. How can we integrate things now? Not just, I think oftentimes it's easy to look at a tool and say like what it can't do versus what can it do, and what are the creative ways that we can start pulling in this future but now present technology into our workflows today. So that's kind of where my mind is at with that. And so you have that background. And just to give further background on that, you did a Technical Achievement Award from the Academy of Motion Picture Art and Science for advancements in deep compositing. So, this is some really advanced stuff that you've contributed to, and as well as a number of other achievements. But that's just the background. And to give anyone context of this conversation as well, my background, I'm just a visual effects artist in the industry. I'm a compositor, freelance. I've been kind of going around to different studios, but I'm also more of a generalist outside of work. So I like to play around with VR, AI stuff, recently a lot in Unreal Engine. And I think that, especially with AI, it's interesting to think how these can be pushed into production workflows. So what made you think to, bring DALL-E 2 into Nuke? Like, what is your, experimentation with AI so far? Like, what kind of things have you been just playing around with? Like, what are you seeing in the general landscape? That's a very just broad question.
First of all, thanks for having me. And thanks for the introduction. Let me quickly go again, do a bit of a spiel of where I come from. So then, cool. and what you just said, and then we end up back into your question about AI and how I got started with that. So yes, as you said, I'm one of those like self-taught basement nerds of watching Jurassic Park and then the Matrix, and then it was definitely over to like I needed to do visual effects for a living, and I just did it like kind of self-taught by gathering stuff on my Pentium 2 computer back in the days, and even earlier in like DOSland. But I got my first job at Scanline in Munich, luckily just by being at the right place at the right time. Then went to Bournemouth to study because I wanted to get more into programming and like the technical background, and worked in Australia pretty much everywhere where I am right now. But I spent 10 years in the States, in LA, in between. Nice. So and once I won my Academy Award for deep compositing, which was awesome, and it was a very collaborative effort between lots of people in the industry, and I was just one of them. And it just is one of those like things in life where one thing comes to like a conclusion. I was like, okay, cool. We did something great here. We won the award. What other things are out there? And at the same time, kind of VR and the interactive leg of companies like Framestore that I'm with whom I'm working for right now started up, and there was an opportunity later to kind of switch gears a bit and still do visual effects and still write tools in Nuke for visual effects and whatnot, if need be, if commercial comes in that needs my help. Did a bunch of crowd stuff for LA and stuff for frames in LA, but the primary focus was to move into this interactive field and doing VR, AR, lots of applications, a lot of different tools, a lot of clients in the tech company in the California tech space. That were really fun to work with and challenging. And from then on, obviously, virtual production, because we were the real-time people who already kind of knew this for a couple of years. Once virtual production became popular, we kind of did it before, but we kind of it started to become really popular, and it was a natural fit, and then we did virtual production. And since then I moved back to Australia, and I've been kind of this crazy inventor in Sydney who is still in touch with the motherships in all the other offices, trying to figure out what future production technologies are valuable, and also working on projects that are a bit different. Nobody else either touches because they either have little funding and need some sort of tech
or they're
solution to make them efficient or too busy or whatever. So I'm kind of this like weirdo that gets called in for like it's airlifted in if there's some sort of issue sometimes. So that's kind of what it is. So I made a bit of a career out of staying ahead of the curve. It's the same with deep image compositing. The first time we showed it to people, they were like, we see that it makes sense, but I don't have terabytes of storage and it's too slow. It will never work.
You had to sell the idea.
Exactly. And then, we just kept doing it because we believed in it. And we like, at that point, jokingly, I remember one compositor was like, oh, this is going to win you an Academy Award. But that was like 8 years before. And we're like, haha, funny. But anyway, we kind of had to kind of keep going in it. And it was a bit weird. And we kept doing it. And it was great because once people caught on to the idea, the rest of the production kind of caught up with it. So like suddenly we were like, hey, yes, it costs a lot of storage, but you need less versions because instead of integrating it render after render after render, if you take the amount of storage your actual shot cost is versus the one with deep image, it might be just a little bit more. It's actually not crazy. So you have other savings, and because people can start working on shots, just as a context, deep compositing, you can just, instead of A over B, you can do A inside B with multiple samples. So the idea is, if you have an owl that flies through a cloud, usually you have to wait till the owl is animated before you do the cloud because you have to render them together. If you can render them, integrate them like properly after the fact, the cloud guy and the animation guy can kind of work at the same time. So the cost savings are and the time savings are immense.
The time savings.
Exactly. And that's
to give a simple explanation for people who have no compositing experience, there's a lot of things. It becomes difficult when you have 100 layers and you need to make all those things go between each other and particles and all these things. It becomes very time intensive if you were to do it.
Especially if there's animation involved. If an element is always behind another element, it's easy. But usually if there's talking and flying creatures, it's like one is in front of the other, then behind the other, then going through another, then through another thing, over another thing, and it gets really hard to keep track of what's where, and it gets really complicated. Because we used it for Prometheus for the orrery scene, where all the planets spin up. In Prometheus, in the pilot's chamber there, and there was all those galaxies swirling and swirling, and the lasers go through.
Is that the motion graphics one, where it's like the motion graphics?
It's a bit motion graphics, exactly. It was all 3D rendered, and then the integration, and there was lots of tricks that we invented in that job as well, just to you render a cylinder, and all we used the cylinder for was actually to select samples inside it, and to kind of imitate a laser, and then all the samples inside we just graded up, so you have like the laser that goes through and lights stuff up, so stuff like this.
It's cool.
Long story short, I went in a bit of a tangent, but just is to show you that the reason I'm kind of my thought process is always what's new and what's different, and what can we integrate, and what will make sense. So when I first got exposed to AI 2 years ago, when I was just like, I think some person posted something about this thing called VQ and clip. I was like, oh my god, this is amazing! I can text, create stuff. So I looked into it. I got into the Discord servers with the ultras, and I tried to kind of make my way through there, trying to explore stuff. Got my hand on some Colab notebooks. Smoked my machine here with crazy GPU hours just to get it, and coding some stuff up, breaking things.
Were you using this at all? Like these experiments that you had started doing, were these for like actual commercial projects, or these were like more just experimentation outside?
Zero. This is zero. At the same time, it's also when NFTs became popular. So my first thought was like, hey, maybe I make an NFT with AI art. How cool would that be?
Exactly.
Let's park the NFT part for 1 second, because I have a whole other NFT side of myself.
Yeah, I have a writing here on specifically on like virtual marketplaces and NFTs and stuff like that. So that'll be part of this conversation. If we can get to it. I know you're short on time in this potentially. But yeah, continue what you're saying. Cool.
Yeah, so when I first saw that, I was like, this is awesome. Yes, it's not dead. It's a bit like, the deep image compositing. The first time we saw it, the first implementations, we were like, oh, it's a bit shit. But if it works, and if you can get it to work, it will be great. And then I did lots of experiments with it. I connected sound to it at one point. So that was cool, because we connected. I mean, again, it has nothing to do with visual effects per se, but it was cool because we could take, the sound of a dog barking, and feed it into the system, and you got a picture of a dog back. So it's not that it would understand what the sound, the intent of what the sound actually means. It's like typing. It's like typing a prompt, but it was a sound prompt. So it was not music, because that's hard to kind of decipher. But it was literally like street sounds, and that was kind of fun. Again, super low resolution. I even did a thing once where I worked with an engine that could create shader code. So we had shader code created by the AI that it would then run in real time to make images. Like it's cool, but it's all like the results of low resolution. It's all not that visually pleasing, but it's a cool technology to.
But that's what I'm saying. It's sort of on the edge of sort of experimental, but like I feel like what's happening right now.
Exactly.
So you were early. You're already experimenting this 2 years ago, before Midjourney, DALL-E.
Exactly. All of those things. And then, then I started my little tangent in my side brain with NFTs, and again, it's parked there. I started this whole procedural art persona and did some collection and blah blah, but I forgot about AI art. And then at one point, I get an invite to this Midjourney thing. I was like, "What the heck is this?" And
how long ago was that? How many months ago? Do you know?
6 months, probably.
Okay, so you were in the early crowd.
I think so. It was in the early crowd, and then, but it was just because people were like, "Hey, you should check this out. Didn't you post all this AI art stuff?" But I'd forgotten about it. And suddenly all those things popped up: Midjourney, DALL-E. And they all became. And I was like, "Excuse me, what happened in this 1 year of like us nerds trying to figure this out?" Suddenly there's products and marketplace, or kind of places that are integrated with Discord. And like, why Discord? Crazy idea, but kind of cool. And all those things happen. And it was awesome. And when everybody started to kind of come on board with the idea that, hey, this is actually not just some crazy thing to make something that kind of looks like what you can tell it. It actually works. So I tried to obviously experiment again, do lots of things. I like to go on journeys with those technologies that are hard to otherwise explore in storytelling. So I do a lot of like behind the scenes. I have this whole thing where I'm letting DALL-E or Midjourney make behind the scenes pictures of movies that never existed, and then let you guess what picture they are. Those kind of things. Or like show me a photo of the French Revolution, like a selfie of a soldier at the French Revolution, something like this, where you can have it make up pictures from as a pseudo time traveler.
Have you played it all with so for people who don't know, if you get DALL-E 2, if you have access right now, you also have access to GPT-3, which is essentially the language model from OpenAI. Have you played it all with that?
It's funny, I had access to GPT-3 to way earlier than to DALL-E. I was using the playground a lot. I had a day at work once, so I didn't tell anybody, but I answered all my work emails with GPT-3. I had their email, like if it was a question, and obviously I proofread it in case there was something that was inappropriate or that was not. But if it's like, hey, have you time to meet at this point at this time, and I just gave it one prompt, like, and the reply for this email was positive, and then it just generates a whole email for me, and I just spent a whole day. It was not a very busy day, but I spent a whole day doing this, and then I told some people afterwards, like, hey, this is actually not me that wrote this.
But it's GPT-3, I feel like it's one of the ones that not that many people are talking about because it's not visual, it's not catching your attention on these sort of platforms. But something that I found, so I've been experimenting with Midjourney maybe about around the same time as you, like maybe 6 months ago, 5 months ago. I was in the early crowd, and before this sort of blew up on like LinkedIn and stuff like that. And I was like, I was looking at this, like, this is going to be everywhere in like a month, so, usually where my brain is oriented is like products and services, as well as like trying to pull in creative ways to like, how can I actually use this in a shot? But GPT-3 in relation to, let's say Midjourney and DALL-E 2, you can generate better words using GPT-3. Hey, give me 10 words that are more descriptive than this word, right? And it's almost an improved Google search. And so that's what I've been using it for. GPT-3 is like to get better prompts. But also what's fascinating is it's even read something like the Nuke API. Like I can say, code me. It's very simple Python, still somewhat limited, but I can say, hey, make me 10 merge nodes that are connected, and it will code Python that actually works in Nuke. And you can
I haven't tried that. That's fun. I didn't know
it actually works.
I did once.
It's incredible.
Once I asked it to write a Python program to generate a random number, and it actually made a program that made a random number. It was funny. It seeded the random number with a magic number, like some number it made put in there, so it would have worked. And it literally made a function that you could call.
That's what I'm saying. It actually works. It actually works.
I think there was some dumb. It was very inefficient. It's like it looped over a thing. Like I think it looped over like 10 times randomly over a random number generate, and then just returned the last one. So I could have just done it on the first. So it was inefficient and a bit silly.
I wonder how finding
but I actually copy and pasted it in the console, and it just literally worked, like without any changes, no formatting errors, nothing. That's just crazy.
That's what I'm saying is like but that's starting to show you how things are starting to shift. That's what I'm looking at. And like, I can ask a plain sentence, and I have access to this tool now, and it gives me some code that works. But you can also do things like, write me a 4-paragraph story about a bunny wearing a book bag, and it will give you this whole like story of this animal walking, and it understands there's an animal hopping on its 2 legs, and then why a book bag? Oh, it's going to the library. So it understands like all of this context, and it's giving an entire story, like a plot. Even sometimes dialogue, it's the width of that tool. What we're seeing with images right now, how people are taking them and supplementing them, or already using them as a base. The same thing is going to happen with code, with the language, and just across the entire board of sort of the, at least for the concepting.
With everything. And I was very lucky that I worked on a project with some, I'm not sure what the state of the project is, so I don't want to mention it, but it's like on like some sort of virtual entity for a dance artist troupe, basically. And so I did a lot of GPT-3 work, just trying to understand, can we ask GPT-3 about the character of this virtual being, basically, and see how it would react and how we could prompt it. And the stuff it wrote back sometimes was deep, man. It was actually like thought-provoking. And I'm like, wow. It was pretty cool. Can I swear? But sorry, I just swore without asking.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
I think
completely. But the so that is crazy. And I'm a big AI believer. I drank the Kool-Aid long ago, so I'm like, I'm already welcoming our new machine overlords. but it is true that it's mind-boggling what's possible, and it's not there. It's like simulating properties of molecules, helping us with cancer or based on images, detecting, like it's so wide, like helping lawyers prep, reading through whatever case file. It's gonna change.
It's gonna change everything.
And I don't think everybody gets that. Everybody's like, oh, this AI stuff soon. And no. It's first of all, it's here.
Yeah.
Second, it's gonna affect everybody. Because people are at least thinking is like, oh, but the creative industry is the last thing that's gonna get changed. I see it how it can change like manufacturing, but but creative is always something that humans can do. Fast forward a year, and suddenly you have like.
I think something that's interesting are the comparisons to like, when you read about this, it's like, painting to photography, like this leap in technology, but this is not exactly the same thing because it's able to contextualize things. It's able to have those abstract ideas presented. So it's not like it's just capturing something that's there. It's creating something that's even though it's sourced from millions of images and all these things, it's still creating something. So it is a creative machine.
This is you get very philosophical quite quickly, and this is my jam. So you can literally spend 10 hours talking to me about this. And I'm sometimes on a bunch of Twitter spaces recently talking about similar things. But
yeah,
I always say if people are like, this is not art, or if people are like, this is not real. I'm like, things change, and technology changes. And I always compare it to the monks that were in the Dark Ages who were making all the books, and suddenly this guy comes along and makes a printing press.
Yeah,
and it's like those are not real books. They're not run by monks, and there's not real art in there. I'm like, it's debatable.
Look,
and it's the same thing with AI art. It's like, is it art or not? I don't really care. Does it move you? Does it tell a story? Do you want to buy it?
At the end of the day, you only have really two choices. It's either you refuse to use this thing, which I think is a terrible idea, or you figure out ways to integrate it into your workflow and start to get creative, because whether or not you like it, the productivity leap on a number of tasks, which we can talk about, like specific ways that we think maybe can be used now. And that's what's interesting is like I said at the beginning, is like the thing I see often in these conversations, like on the forums and stuff, people are pointing out all the things it can't do, but there are so many things already doing. So, even just for, concept design and visual targets, even let's say we're talking about the small realm of compositing for a moment, having a visual target that you're trying to do look development on, whether that's some kind of magical effect or whether that's some kind of landscape environment, the aesthetics that those are producing and the visual targets that those lock down within seconds of typing a prompt used to take weeks of time before you could, let's say, present that to a client or have that finalized concept so a team could start to move towards that visual target. And so even if on that level, that's already a practical use of using this tool. But I think it spans a lot further than that. I wanted to show two videos. I think I sent you one of them, but I can send you a link actually, and then you can take a look at it. But
is it the architecture visualization one and the tennis
yeah,
player?
so I'm going to show that in the video, so I'm going to edit this and people can see it. And then there's going to be another video. I can send it to you real quick. I'll just like cut the recording here for a second, but so check this out. This is kind of a more experimental one. So I'll show this in the video. It's just interesting to see people starting to like motion track these in, and seeing these sort of experimental compositing kind of videos. The other video I saw, which I've just shown as well, is the sort of architectural replacement. So taking 2D tracking, or maybe not 2D tracking, but anything that's a nodal pan. So people don't know what that is. It's a camera that only rotates. If we only have a camera that's rotating, we basically are dealing with a 2D image. So anything that's a nodal pan, or anything that is beyond the main parallax plane, anything in that far background, that's game for AI. And that's how I'm thinking that this can start to be integrated, is like anything beyond that plane, we can start to, digital matte painting, these type of things. But that's how I'm starting to look at it, and how we can start to project these images, how we can use them as displacement maps, how we can use them for various effects if we need textures and stuff like that.
And the speed of this is crazy. Like we have like I've seen a Blender add on mine, and I've only seen people like making textures with it, like gritty metal, and they got it.
Yeah,
and it looks good. It's crazy. And
exactly.
So this is totally where it's heading. I'm actually currently working on something as well where I'm actually making a camera move work.
Yeah.
By 3D tracking it in Nuke and then masking a part of the image that is kind of a wall or something that's flat, and then you can kind of change that, and then because the move is not crazy, you can still try to solve it. I literally don't have time right now to finish it, but I have a shot open right now where, again, it's nothing to do with the project, just doing it for myself. So let me answer a bunch of the things that you said, because you really had about a bunch of points that are interesting. One thing to add, to say you shouldn't, you either refuse to work with it or you accept it. The only thing I would add to that, it's important. And this is important for your listeners and everybody to understand, is like, this is huge and this is going to affect us everywhere. So as soon as we adopt an attitude that really makes sure that, and I'm not trying to do a moral panic, and I'm not, thinking Terminator, but we need to really double check what we're doing here is morally legit. That means, is the stuff that it's based on sourced properly? Is anybody getting ripped off? Is anybody getting left behind? Is any group, any person, any people left behind by the data set?
What do you think about that? What is your personal standpoint?
My personal standpoint is that I have to trust what's out there. And I have to, but it's, again, the source is the most important part. I for example, think that DALL-E does, because, again, it might be my personal bias, but I feel DALL-E has a more a bigger eye on morals and on bias than the other ones. But that's also because I got introduced to DALL-E with an artist onboarding where they were really onto us, making sure that this is there. Or you can't make any sort of pornographic or other images with it. On that said, on top of that, though, I need to acknowledge that there's what's called, I think, starting to create this term called the AI genie. By that, it means is once a network is out there, it's gonna get used. So you can, once a network is there to image create, once one is there, and yes, on the platform, people are like, you can't make, not safe for work images with it. As soon as the network leaks, somebody will do it, and somebody can do it. That means,
Stable Diffusion is already out there now, and for people who don't know, again, this is basically DALL-E 2, except it's truly open source. It's out there, like you can run it locally on a machine. So these data sets are out there now. It's there. So you can't put it back in the bottle.
Exactly. It's kind of, so what we need to do is a moral framework around it and an understanding, and then it's the same thing. If people can hit each other in the face, and it's not good, but we have established that it's not a good idea. And I feel like we should do the same. We have to have the same thing. It's very new and very fresh, and robot ethics comes to this, and all those weird new obscure fields.
For sure.
I just think it's important to start thinking about them, so we don't get left out in the cold when something bad happens.
For sure.
And then the other thing that is really interesting is that is talking about those kind of commercialized art issues with, is it art, is it not, what do you do with it? We in visual effects, we're constantly doing art, but it's commercial, it's for somebody else, it's commercialized. It's not, you're doing somebody else's vision. So saying it's not creative enough because you're just using what the network does, I find it a bit weird, because you are the AI network, but it's just,
it's in your brain.
silicon versus carbon-based substrate AI.
And of course,
somebody with some director and an image. So it's like,
of course, oftentimes, as in commercial work, clients or anyone are presenting, hey, here's a reference image of, this is some other commercial work. So oftentimes this is already the case of kind of mimicking things that we see. So it is a very weird and kind of strange moral situation in terms of, I think it's such a cool tool, but I can see how people are frustrated, like people have developed styles, but then there's also the argument of like, you can't really copyright a style You can copyright an artwork, but you can't really copyright a style. So it's this whole weird
it is
conversation.
Weird. But that's why, to go a bit away again from the kind of more philosophical approaches to be more practical, what I then at one point was sick of was those websites or those bots that I have to type in, because I'm a coder, I'm a hacker in that space. Like, I like to make my own code. I like to create stuff and break stuff. That's by the way, that's how the first kind of months for us were. Like, we were see what happens if you train another layer of a network, or cut a layer out and see what happens, just to see what to understand those things that you're dealing with here on a technical point of view. So I wanted to really have those networks available to me, so I can connect them with my tools and all those kind of things.
Exactly.
So the only thing I could do at the time, because I didn't have stable diffusion access and it was not released yet, was to reverse engineer DALL-E.
Yeah.
So what I did is I in Chrome, I just listened to the requests that went out, because it's all like, it's not that the website is just a JavaScript thing that sends out requests. So I listened to the requests and mimicked them in code, and voila, it worked. So
is there any plans to release that? Any plan and put that out
there? By now, there's already, if you look at Python DALL-E things, there are things out there. You still have to hack it in a way. You still have to sit in Chrome once, because what they have is a so-called bearer token. That's like a key that changes every couple of months or a couple of weeks. I think, I don't know what they can, but it's bound to you. That's how you credit. You still pay credits. It's not illegal. It's just that you're doing the same thing as the website does. You just do it from a Python script.
Because so I feel like, for those of us, my Python skills are, basically very basic. Is there a way to, I feel like a lot of these tools need to be productized. I feel like these technologies exist. They just need to exist in products as very simple tools. People need to be able to pick them up and break them, like you were talking about, and just experiment with what can you do with these tools and not have to worry about any kind of technical workflow at all.
It's a bit like in Nuke, though. It's like you have a gizmo and you can break that, and it's like, it's made out of small building blocks, or you're trying to actually code a plugin, and I think both need to exist. But what I did then, as soon as I had it actually running in Python, I was like, look, let me see if I can feed it from Nuke. And did that, and it's like a very simple. It's not sophisticated. It's just a gizmo that if you want to inpaint something, it just writes out a PNG with an alpha.
Cool.
Dumps it into an HTTP request, as the website does if you upload it. And waits till he gets the image back, and then saves the image and does a read node and reads the image back in. It's it's not like there's no fanciness going on.
So just continuing the conversation, I have a quote here. I'm reading the book right now, The Metaverse. I think it's by Matthew Ball. I think that's the author, but the quote is, sometimes emerging tech is seen as a trivial toy. In other cases, its potential is understood, but not its nature. Most often, people misunderstand which specific technologies will thrive and why. On occasion, we get everything right except the timing. And the other quote, so that's kind of an interesting to frame this sort of thing about, it's, some people think it's a gimmick. I'm not in that camp. But the other thing that is kind of interesting here is what makes technological transformation difficult to predict is the reality that is not caused by any one invention or individual, but instead requires many changes to come together. After new technologies created, society and individual inventors respond to it, which lead to new behaviors and new products, which in turn leads to new use cases for the underlying technology, thereby inspiring additional behaviors and creations and so on. Recursive innovation is why the biggest believers in the internet 20 years ago rarely predicted much about how it would be used today. And so that's what I kind of think is happening right now. There's sort of a convergence happening. And that acceleration that is, at least I'm feeling based on the landscape and how fast these things are coming, is because of like these sort of use cases. Like if this one tool comes out over here, and now we start using it in film over here, and we can do this thing 20 or 30% faster, and now that process is more efficient, how much does that compound? And yeah, it's just a general thought that these things are these sort of verticals are happening next to each other. But I think that what we need to do is really get the creative and technical minds together to bring these adjacent verticals together and also productize them. Like, these need to be easy to use products, and that is what's going to create a huge creative explosion, I think. And so, like the DALL-E 2 thing in Nuke, or if you're bringing Stable Diffusion in Nuke, that would be cool too, if you have plans to do that.
all in the day's work, mate. But the problem is, it's just time is the problem. Like, I'm pretty sure after I've done this and I have Stable Diffusion running on my computer, I give me a day. It's not hard. Like, that's the thing, is like, I feel like there's a difference as well to see it from a pure artist perspective and from a technologist perspective, because for me, it's like, give me a piece of Python that runs over here in a Nuke session, and I can make those guys talk to each other. It might not be super user friendly, but I can make it work for myself. And that's why we kind of serve the wave first, I guess, if that's a term, to like be there, because we can do those things. It doesn't mean that we always have the most creative approaches, like the video that you said with the wiping out, like it's cooler than what I'm doing. But for example, there was stuff that I'm doing is like, hey, I also love NERF. For the viewers out there, NERF is a neural light field. So the idea is that you take a bunch of pictures like in photogrammetry land, but rather than it's a bit like deep image. We were like, hey, we have those high class renders from 3D people, and now we filter them into 2D images, and then in comp we have to deal with all sorts of issues, but all the data is technically upstream is there. So the same with NERF is like, hey, so we have all this photographic data, and then we boil it down into those shitty triangle meshes, and then we need to render those back out into 3D images. And I'm like, why don't we stay there? Have a network that creates this understanding of what the subject is, and it uses a bunch of. Again, we were trying to do this with a buddy of mine, Mariano, like 4 years ago or 5 years ago, and we got black and white images back, and I was like, "This works, amazing!" And then obviously Google.
All we need with that right now is this is a funny story. I was at SIGGRAPH like a couple of weeks ago with I don't know if you know him or not, but he publishes a lot of stuff about Nuke, Erwin, and he's a pipeline head of pipeline at I think CraftX right now, but. I was having a conversation with him about NERFs, and that's what we're seeing as well. It's like, look, here's an awesome technology. One of the best presentations at SIGGRAPH. They scanned this dude in like 30 seconds, and we have like a full representation. We have transparent hair, all the things we can hope for. And what he said was, if it looks right, it is right. This is not a proper geometry, but it looks right from the right angle. And when I was talking to Erwin about it, I was like, dude, all we need is this just needs to be productized. It just needs to be brought into Nuke as a tool, and we can do set extensions. We can do, somebody needs to link this up with Unreal, talking virtual production stages. They're always touting these virtual environments that we're capturing. Guess what? Go with a 360 camera in this location with a NERF, and you're not going to have to worry about, one of the limitations of these LED volumes is the ability to run ray tracing real time. Most of the time it's actually baked lighting, right? So imagine a NERF that actually has moving reflections and transparent edges, and it works from the perspective of where you are. That's all you need.
So what I'm about to say is, like, I'm a bit devil's avocado right now. I'm not trying to negate what you said, because I agree with you. This stuff is great. It's amazing. The only thing is, it is a bigger shift than just saying let's use NERFs, because we've been rendering in the same way, relatively speaking, for 30 years or longer. Like, that means triangles, that means geometry surfaces that we shoot rays, that we hit test, and then we do something, and then we get pixels back, because this is kind of gruffly speaking what we do. We have hardware that does it really well. We have experience with it, and it kind of does stuff. NERFs is different, because suddenly you don't have triangles anymore. And I said this years ago. I was like, I'm over rendering triangles. I'm over it. I want to do something else. Neural networks are better. They are more advanced in what they can do, and smaller, predictable sizes, streamable, all those kind of good stuff. The issue is, though, that we have workflows established to When you're rendering triangles, you get normal passes. You get blah, blah, blah. And then based on a normal pass, you can do all sorts of other trickery, and you have a workforce established that can use those to do stuff. Now you go ahead and say NERFs, they look great from one angle, and they look great. What if you animate it? What if you want to pin something to the guy's lapel? Can you get a PREF pad? Like, see what I mean? Like, there's more than just. I think it comes
down to
just that one.
Yeah, I think like you lose, but it's similar to the LED volumes though, right? Because LED volumes, these environments are coming oftentimes pre-packaged, baked lighting. You can't do that much except maybe grading down and doing these type of things.
I've not worked on many LED volume projects, probably like 1, 2, 3, 4 ones. And the one specifically where I was really big involved, it was a tested frame store that we did 2 or 3 years ago. And we definitely changed the lighting. Definitely. I mean, we had a render farm.
Was this lighting, or was this like?
No, we had a render farm that would rebake the lighting.
Okay, so you rebake
it. Rebake exactly, but because we had it on a farm, we could do the whole stage in like 15 minutes. And if you move a light, you could see what you're doing. But yes, maybe the bounces were not light and all this. So then we swarmed it, and then the swarm did the job. And 15 minutes later, after like everybody's actually getting ready to shoot.
So it's less art directable, but there's a trade-off.
Especially because the whole point, for me at least, with LED volume is to bring reality back into, or bring the virtual stuff back into the real world. It's not so much the other way around. So it's realizing that you have somebody who has the craft of an art director, who knows how to make stuff look good in camera, and you have a virtual guy, and the guys can now work together and speak the same language and stand around one monitor to make one shot look good. And that means both of them need to give. That means the guy who makes the foreground needs to understand what's in the background and maybe change it a bit or help out. And the background guy needs to be able to respond and remove a tree, add a tree, move a light, grade it, softbox, matte, post effect volumes, all this kind of stuff needs to work together. And if that works, it's the best time you're ever going to have on set, in my opinion. Because suddenly, the older, not so digital, spray paint gun holding craft guy and the ultra technical Unreal artists are sitting around a monitor working together, and that's awesome. And that's really when it works really well. You make amazing stuff.
To go on a stage before, like how big was? You said you did a project. How big of a stage were you guys working with?
Pretty big. It fit a whole like 15 cars in it at one point, and the whole forest. It was huge. It was. I mean, I don't have dimensions, but it was a volume and a half. Like, it was big. And it was an internal test for Framestore. I don't know actually how far that actually ever went into the public eye, but it was cool because we really got it to work. And we then shot the whole project, and the whole idea of the project was like having 4 or 5 completely different, like a forest, a magical forest, a freeway, Mars, and we all shot those in one, including the foreground. Obviously we had to plan it out, so like start with the forest with all the all the crap on the ground and all this stuff, and then sweep it all out and pull some rocks in, and it becomes Mars, and take those rocks out and it becomes a freeway. But in one day we could go to all those places. Try to do that on a stage otherwise. So it was awesome.
I had a chance like a few weeks ago to go on one, and that was my first time being it. And what surprised me was like, just the dynamic range is so, when you see something filmed on it, it's like, okay, but when you see it with your eyes, and you can see how bright these screens are getting and how dark they're getting, and how the things that are very close to the edge of the stage look real. I guess like the trick is they never throw focus right on the screen or something like that. You have some problems there, but it is really interesting to see in real life, to see those systems.
I mean, we never ran the panels that we have back in the days. I think making numbers up, but it was a low percentage. I probably say never over 20-30%, and they were bright. Because because panels like this are actually made for outdoor concerts, so you have to be able to see that stuff in broad daylight. So they pump a lot. You can feel the light. Like, it's weird if you take a stage like this and you stand in the center and you put a red on versus blue, you feel the difference in color temperature. Like, it actually is a real thing. Like, it's warmer.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
You can just move the lights around and light your actor. Just to see how it affecting the foreground is. You always see like the background image, but when you actually get to sit there and play with it, and you can like, just see that intensity.
I had a great experience where I was a stand-in for when we did the car scene with the highway, and suddenly I realized, oh my God, I get it why it's awesome. Because you sit in a car and you look in your rearview mirror and you see the virtual car. So imagine I'm not an actor whatsoever, but I can imagine that if I'm sitting there and I'm looking at a green huge blob versus seeing the cars behind me in the traffic jam getting annoyed and honking. Like, I get it. Like, I'm in the scene, and it was just me being a stand-in driving my own car, and because it was like a test, I drove my own car, and then suddenly I see all this stuff in the background. And I'm like, yeah, now I get it. I really get it.
Yeah, cool. And now there are apps for like like the indie level coming out, which I find really interesting as well, because just like how can we bring like the strength of real time to like post-production workflows. That's something I'm really interested in. Is like we see it on stages, but I do think there's going to be a new role that's sort of a lighter compositor. These sort of bringing Unreal and Nuke together. I think that actually is going to be a pretty big thing. Like we're starting to see like job listings for Unreal Engine compositor. You read the listing, and this is for one of the big studios, Unreal Engine and Nuke. They're starting to try to figure out ways to like link the two. But it's interesting to see.
It makes sense. It makes sense because both things are used to work with the final pixel. If you go up the pipeline with an animator never sees a final pixel. They see something which then turns into something which after simulation and some light simulation turns into another pixel.
But it's funny, like the skill set as well. I was talking to my friend who's one of the supervisors on the stage, and he's saying, he has a compositing background. It's like, this is literally the same thing. What they're doing, at least on stage. Like, here's our environment handed to us. And then we're doing live compositing on it. We're doing our color grades, we're adjusting our specular, it's just in real time. But I do think like it's going to get pushed further than just the stages. I think that in post-production, it's going to start coming in a lot more.
I mean, if you go away from AI and go into that space a bit, like it won't take long till somebody cracks the big question, which is how do you get a stage that creates the light and the environment and the background, but also a realistic alpha matte, because you have all the data. I know exactly what pixel is supposed to emit what light, and how long that travels, and if that pixel that emits the light ends up at the pixel in the sensor that it reads, perfect. If that gets interrupted by something like an actor, and suddenly the light that you send out doesn't arrive in the camera anymore, you have and in a percentage you get a matte. So it's hard because you have to know the geometry of the panels, and exactly the difference in each LED is slightly different, and how much light they spill out. So it's not a problem that is easy. But again, going to AI, you can probably measure that stuff and train a network.
So what are you saying, that basically compositing over these LED stage volumes will become
the best of both worlds. You get at the end of the day, you get your lit material from everywhere. You get your backgrounds everywhere, but you also get a matte, and you can then go in. You have the Unreal scene, so you can re-render, move stuff around, change things.
But it's like not gonna get dust. I mean, you can do. I guess they are doing some particles and stuff in the foreground, but if you're not gonna get a huge dust cloud blowing between foreground and background and those kind of interactions, like
you could come up with a billion ideas that you could do with it. Like even things like the classic, but also that's what I'm trying to say. Virtual production is a paradigm shift a bit, but it's also a bit of a tool because more than AI for me. And let me explain that. So production is a tool because there's certain physical limitations that you cannot overcome. Like the whole problem with having a huge corridor and that has a bright light source in the back, and then it's here, and then because I'm close to the screen, that thing that is in the virtual world, hundreds of meters behind me, still lights my ear up. There's just no way around that other than going really far away from that thing and going like there's tricks. That's why you never stand really close to LED walls. There's all sorts of ways to mitigate that, but there's certain limitations that you just cannot get over, and certain times, and it's also the technology is still a bit clunky. Like you track everything, make sure it's all set up, and does it track properly?
Do you feel like here's a question. Do you feel like it's a crossover technology? Like it's a transitory technology? Like will we even need the screens in 5 years or 10 years? Can we just relight the real footage and it will intelligently do so? It can actually figure out the depth of a human face and relight it intelligently with the materials, and we won't need the screens at all, and you don't have to have the expensive, huge machine that is very expensive running. What do you think about that?
I mean, where I think this is all going is a bit dystopian. Because the questions that you then have to ask yourself, what the heck do you need actors for? If you have an AI that can make faces, I'm like, I might just sit here and say I need a 28-year-old male of that complexion with this attitude, with a big scar on their right eyebrow.
Or do you think that
talking about this? Oh no, make the nose bigger. Oh no, make them. It's very hard to say that it's that easy, but extrapolating that we were at like clunky images that were really hard to make by a bunch of nerds on Collab to Midjourney in like a year and a half. It's very hard. It's very hard to say. Like I can sit now. I can like if I would have started my career knowing that in like 15 years from now I can sit there and you can type a dragon on a pile of stones, select the Sydney Opera House, and do nothing, and it happens. Yes, the dragon is not perfect. Yes, it's not. Oh, a blue dragon. Oh, that makes it. See what I mean? Like it's crazy, and imagine how this is gonna go. But it's also obviously you need actors for the personal connection with them. Then that actors need to see something. So it's very hard to say will it actually go away completely. But I think there's going to be a shift as well, which is the type of content you can then produce. Because why do you need me suddenly to pre-create something that you could do yourself? So if I'm a viewer and so like I'm a bit moody right now, I want to see something uplifting about my favorite sport that features middle-aged people having an argument and then resolving it.
Basically,
so then the script
the full movie is basically what we're talking about.
To emotional, to tracking my eyes to where I'm looking at. Oh, he keeps wandering away from the screen. We don't doing the right thing. Let's make the next scene a bit different. Like you can see how suddenly content creation and engaging yourself. Next point is like, why is the heck is this a screen? Why am I not in there? So like it very quickly goes into the metaverse and what it is on a holodeck, which is obviously we're not there yet. I mean, if you go in, if you say put a headset,
I feel like So when I was asking a question about is LED screens a crossover technology, my feeling is that it kind of is, and I might be wrong in this, but I feel like virtual filmmaking from any place in the world, it always comes down to economics, right? Like it always comes down to what's cheaper and can produce the same result. And the cost of these things are always going down, right? The cost of this is almost like I think it's like Spielberg. He talks about like literally anyone has a iPhone now, and it was so hard to film back then. It was so expensive, and it's kind of like what's happening now on the indie level in terms of like Unreal and real time. And also all of the assets cost zero now. It's all free, and with Quixel, we could just build everything for free. So the cost of everything is just going down, and that's just going to continue. It's not going to switch directions here. So, the future that I'm excited for is standing in a VR headset and directing a scene with people in a multi-user collaborative virtual environment. I think that is going to happen at least in our lifetime. I don't know that it's going to be, to give you an example, we were already doing this. I had a friend of mine, we were doing some script writing and storyboarding just for fun and seeing how we could work in a virtual space. And we were using an app called Gravity Sketch. So you can, and it's a multi-user interactions. It's multiplayer.
Yeah, I know it.
You basically
it's really cool.
Yeah, it's cool. You can. What's cool with it is like, it's like a modeling tool traditionally, which is interesting. But what we were using it for was actually getting these kit bash sets off of the internet, and you could just assemble a scene really quick, and you actually had a camera with a focal length and you can frame it up. And instead of drawing all your storyboards, we can frame up like more of a photographer or a filmmaker. We can move around. We can take a puppet. We can frame our character. It's like, what is the next evolution of that? You know, it's like it's full on virtual filmmaking.
The other thing is as well is like, now imagine you and your buddy are in this session, but also imagine you have one or two different virtual entities in there as well, and those virtual entities are helping you as well. So what do you do if one is a script writer who's like changing your script based on your inputs, constantly saying, giving you suggestions. One is like an actual modeling thing that actually makes stuff. So it's like, hey, I want a chair from the 17th century mixed with a modern one that's made out of marble. Okay, here you go. Like you can see how this goes. So it really boils down to what you want to see. And that's what I said before. Is like, well, it's fun to direct it, but suddenly if everybody can do that, I'm not saying that everybody is a great director, but everybody has an idea of what they want to see. So if they can express that somehow, or we can even detect it.
It becomes not about the craft anymore. It becomes about the imagination aspect, maybe. I mean, you can have an imaginative
the experience that you have.
Yeah, but you can also you can probably have an imaginative AI in that area as well, which is like, you know, so maybe even having imagination is not a separating factor. So this is like where it goes dystopian again. It's like there is no thing that is like safe in the distant future. So it's hard to even predict or talk about, you know, 15 years from now. It's not even, you know, interesting to look at video.
Exactly, especially if you mix it with the harsh reality of real, and you know where the real world is going, and you know, trying to establishing trust for politics or whatever, and you know, all sorts of entities. It gets really, I mean, obviously, COVID also helped this whole
narrative
to kickstart all those developments, because it's also like suddenly we are all sitting at home and still have to work together, and suddenly tools that, you know, and we did it. That's the other thing. It's like suddenly we were forced to do it, and we still delivered Marvel movies from home, and nobody leaked anything, and everybody worked together, and everybody got paid. And if you would have proposed that without COVID, it was like, hey, wouldn't it be better if we would all sit at home, and you know, I could move to my parents who are not that well right now place in, you know, rural America, and still work, and you know, shift my hours a bit here and there, but you know, I'm more flexible. I can be with my loved ones in a place that I can afford rent, and it's all good, and we still make the same kind of content, and it worked. So I feel the same thing is happening with AI. Suddenly we're like, right now lots of people are like, yeah, but shift will work. You wait till I make the first commercial without telling you a background thing was replaced, and then I tell you in the behind the scenes, by the way, this was not made by anybody but an AI entity, and you guys didn't even blink. Then if you're like, oh shit, like imagine to be a bit more precise of what is possible right now, you could already do, like, let's say you do a World War II movie, and you have like a pen, and they're like, oh, just if you would have one more wrecked tank in the background. Okay, put a card there, tell Dali what you want, make 700 different versions. And I tell you, at least one of them, or at least a combination of 3 of them together, where the turret from this one and the tracks from this one and the whatever markings from that one are correct. You do a quick paint over that takes you 3.5 seconds to bring it together. You track it in, there's your shot. Otherwise, you would have to go to your matte painter, to your 3D guy, to your effects guy.
I think the people who are going to be most affected by this stage are matte painters, actually, because anything you can project, if you can project it and you don't have to paint it anymore, you can use AI. You can use AI right now. I think.
I mean, right now, yes. At this very second in time, everybody who paints is in trouble, and not in trouble. Like, again, it's a tool, so we still need somebody who brings it together.
They need to bring it into the workflow, because look, it'll just speed it up, and you can get all of these concepts. So, you know, of course, having a skill is extremely beneficial, because you need that fidelity, and you still need the exact thing. But
the only thing I would be, again, devil's avocado for is we're in a weird time right now. And lots of times I'm actually now, because it's so public. It used to be that, you know, we were doing visual effects, and you know, it was this magic that happens in a computer, and the people in Hollywood make those things happen. And now, because it's, you know, everybody can hop into Midjourney, or the bar of entry is very low, so you can quite quickly do that. So there's not a lot suddenly what I'm trying to say is that suddenly the clients know more about the technology than we do, in a sense, or think they know more. And I already have those things like, oh, can you use AI for that? I'm like, yeah, trust me, I'm into this and I'm really deep into this, and no, you can't. That's not how it works. And there's like, I just type it, and then
I would imagine there's definitely going to be some problems there with,
especially in the interactive field, with ad agencies and stuff like this. They probably use them in their pitches or in their pitch decks. They start to use it and successfully use it, and then, but there's still a big difference to go from a pitch deck to a photorealistic shot. Like, there's still some stuff that needs to happen, and we're not there yet, but we can use it a lot in workflows. And the thing is, at least for me, is like I try to integrate into the tools early, give it to artists, and also myself try to break it and see where it stops working, and then power through that. Because if you just see the first flaw and be like, it's not going to work, then you're not going to progress. You need to really stick with it.
But you also have to spend a lot of time to, like, I spent countless hours in these 3 AI, and you have to, like, you really, it's still like, that's why when you're saying it's like tool, it's still like a tool where, you need to really, experiment and, feel out how each one of those work. And I know we're at an hour here as well. So do you probably have to go?
No. What I'm trying to figure out is how you could, I think it makes a lot of sense for people to see those tools, and trust me with this. This is a bit of a thought process, but try to see them a bit more like a co-worker rather than a tool. Because first of all, the whole robot ethics thing says if you're nice to Alexa, it's not that Alexa works better, but you become a better person. So try it. And instead of swearing at your devices, try to be kind to them, and you become a kinder person. The same thing with those entities. It's like they are weird, sometimes even consciously seeming entities. So rather than seeing them as just a tool, I'd like to see them as a collaborator. Obviously, not the same as, if I have a real person there that I can have an emotional connection with, but it's more of a collaboration where you have to figure out how to talk to them the right way. We all have a teammate that is like, I have to talk to this guy in a specific way, I have to talk to this guy in a specific way to get the best work done. And some people are more direct, some people are more emotionally, trying to understand what's happening. The same thing is going with those. You have 3 or 4 different entities, and they all have the different strengths and weaknesses, and you have to figure them out, and you have to explore them. And the person who is the best leader, gets the best out of them. So the amount of times I see prompts for Midjourney, I'm like, how the heck did you dream up that? That's amazing. And the picture that you get back is crazy good. So I would have never thought of this. So there's like a whole new skill emerging. So try to become that skill, because that's what I was trying to say way before when you said about a different type of technology and what will stick and what will not stick. This is maybe a couple of your audience compositors will have gone through the transition of film to digital. When I still started, scanning film, but at one point when we had a digital camera, yes, the first ones maybe didn't have the right resolution yet and not the right dynamic range. But we were all like, look, this is gonna work at one point, and nobody's ever gonna put a piece of film back in a camera because there's way too much hassle. And yes, some people might do it for nostalgic reasons. Fair enough. And we still have people doing Polaroid pictures again. And that's all cool. That still exists. I'm not trying to say it will completely go away, but the bulk of the work is done on a digital camera. It makes that's where we went from the first cameras that we had struggled with to now where everybody shoots everything digital, and nobody thinks to go back. I think the same will happen with AI, but on steroids, because it's not just the camera, it's everything. So you have to start to become familiar with those topics and see where they're going, because the genie's out of the bottle, and the acceleration is going to be so fast that we will be overtaken, and we need to find different ways of working. Because you bring NFTs into the space, and getting paid in cryptocurrency, working all around the globe. It's going to change everything, and it's going to happen in the next 5-10 years for sure, because there's just no way of putting the film back in the camera, because it's just not going to happen. And that's just my opinion.
Cool. So this is kind of part 2, just continuing the conversation. I wanted to ask you just a bit of your background, or the experimentation you were doing in NFTs, as well as just Web3 and Metaverse and like all these sort of buzzwords that are going on, and how much of you think it's happening now, or maybe we came a little bit too early in terms of the excitement around these sort of ideas of the future? And yeah, just your general thoughts on that very broad question to start, and then we can kind of branch off from there.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, there's a lot to unpack, but let me see if I can get a good train of thought going. So myself, I got interested into the crypto space quite early. I was one of those like, oh, Bitcoin, that sounds fun. But sadly, I never made anything in it, and just like watching from clients. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't do VFX anymore. I have one very funny anecdote where I discovered this Ethereum, and I shared it to compositors in a room, and I was like, this is really cool, and they're like 20 cents now. Maybe I should buy a bunch. So I went into the app to buy it, and I did a screenshot of $800 worth of Ethereum at 20 cents.
Yeah,
but I didn't buy. I just have the screen. I think you should make an NFT just out of that screenshot and call it like hope or something. And but yes, I didn't do that. But I remember specifically those bunch of compositors, Josh and Peter, who still have the NFT and the crypto bug as well. Coming to me like 6 months later, and we're like, oh, cool. So you're buying us lunch now? And I was like, because I had forgotten about it, and then at that point Ethereum was already, I don't know how much, $60. So it was cool. But not even compared. It's $2,000. So I could have like retired on that. So that just shows you I was in the space early, but I'm an idiot opposed to finances apparently. That was that. And then when NFTs appeared, of course, it was a natural fit, because it's like, I'm in that space. I like blockchain. I have, tried to understand how smart contracts work, how this all works, how it all runs. And then on top of that, now digital assets get traded. And, having worked in the interactive space with so doing a bunch of like metaverse, tangentially VR projects, AR projects. It was obviously a natural fit. And so I really got into it, and I'm never left since then, basically. Kind of acting as some sort of Web3 person right now for the Framestore interactive arm.
Interesting.
Just purely by exposure and by having done it for a while.
So what do you think, like, just as a general concept, how would you define like Web3? Like, what even is Web3? Like, what is this idea?
I think what works is the analogy that people start with. The initial web was like, and it's just a network of people trying to consume a website that they read, which was hosted at their own machine. And then the next iteration was, people tried to write their own content by, being social together, and it's kind of the big rise of Web 2, and that whole YouTube and Facebook kind of stack of things. And then the third part of the iterations of this web is now suddenly something where we can all talk to each other and live together in a shared space that is secure, and that is allows us to work peer-to-peer directly. I mean, the buzzword here is decentralized, but the idea that we all sit on a bunch of data, and that might be me, that might be Framestore, that might be ILM, all those places technically have a bunch of data, but we can't really capitalize of it, because as soon as you upload it, somebody else owns it. So the kind of peer-to-peer direct nature of working together is actually kind of what excites me, and what's kind of the aspect that I like a lot about it. So regarding to NFTs, I have been releasing one collection on Genetic Chain as a kind of a generative art collection that sold out, which was really fun to do. Really nice to have this kind of community that appreciates mathematically generated art. The cool thing about that is that the actual code for it lives on chain. Is the way Papa designed it or Moise designed it for Genetic Chain. So the code lives on the chain, meaning if you own a piece of my serene animal collection, you could actually change the parameters and save them with a transaction to the chain again, and then your actual artwork that exists as an NFT changes, because you have a bunch of sliders where you can change it, and that would change, it would update automatically, and that's cool, because I think that's more than just
so people, so art. If they buy the NFT, they're getting sort of the controls to manipulate the artwork itself. That's kind of what interesting. Like, so you have some ability to modify it.
But Gizmo Nuke, where you have a bunch of stuff under the hood, but you also have like sliders exposed, and those 3 sliders I allow you to change, and they have an impact. Like for me, I think it was speed of some stuff and size of the shapes, and some, because it's like some SDF signed distance field rendering experiment, so you can blend, you have the shapes either blend in and make a round shape, straight corners, those kind of exposed. But the bigger things like the color palette, that you bought, that like that's a randomly assigned one to you, and you can change the color palette. But I think that's an example of like it's a bit more than picture with a computer and selling it on a blockchain. That's kind of what I think is important, that it's like you take, same with AI art, you take it and you extend it a bit and make it your own, and then try to make it interact, because that's a good part. And you talked about the metaverse, and I think that's where, since COVID, of course, where we all fall in ODs in our office and to each other.
So I mean, so when you were kind of first jumping into it, and you wanted to do this experiment and try to create something unique, is it the interest of just creating your own art and projects that drew you to it, and having the ability to make some kind of income doing your own projects and stuff like that? I feel like from the artist perspective, that's what I saw kind of out there. I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. I saw some really sort of the negative connotation that also comes with the NFT also is something I noticed sort of initially, right? Which was like, people paying enormous amounts of money for sort of like JPEGs. I feel like that's the sort of impression that like most people have. But then when I went into the space a little bit more and I started like talking to people, and I saw like real artists in there, like in Twitter spaces and those kind of things. One thing I always say, and I kind of believe this saying, it's like, bet on the jockey, not the horse. And sort of when you see like all of these people coming together, like artists, entrepreneurs, engineers, all of these really talented people, and some people who have real backgrounds building things in the past. That's what stood out to me more than sort of these sort of headlines, this is sort of sensationalist sort of stories you hear about this topic, but you only know this by kind of going in there and engaging with people and talking to people and say, oh, there's actually some interesting projects that are being built up in here. And I think that was sort of my interest. That's what piqued my interest around it. But I will say, I feel like with at least my impression, I'll tell you my view on it. I feel like maybe it's analogous to, this is gonna be a weird comparison. Do you know the app called Vine? Have you heard of this app before?
7 seconds thing. Was it 7-second videos at the very start?
It was like 10 years ago, but it was short form video, which is just now taking off kind of on the internet in the last like 2 years, like TikTok and these things, right? So, I feel like it was, in the last recording we did, one of the quote I said was, it was about the timing of when things happen. And I feel like this is sort of analogous, right? You have this thing called Vine 10 years ago, and it lasted, it was a very short trend, and then it kind of died. But there was some kind of fire there, like it caught on to something in terms of like the behavior of people and sort of value that it could provide. But the format, as well as the timing, probably machine learning, the algorithms and how information is presented, it was not, it wasn't dialed in. And so now it's just taking off, those sort of the way that people are interacting with short form video and these type of things. I feel like NFTs is sort of a similar thing. If you compare these ideas, it's like, I feel like NFTs right now, it's on a web page, so everyone can see it. It's not really exclusive completely yet. And when I'm sitting in like VR, for example, I feel like you will need some kind of a marketplace, a virtual marketplace that hopefully isn't controlled by, you know, a large corporation or whatever. And I feel like that's where NFTs, or this idea of digital ownership, will make a lot of sense, you know, and that will be an incentive for, like, let's say 3D or visual effects artists that want to make some kind of income, to put their assets on a marketplace, and other people buy them and can display them in a virtual space. But I feel like that's going to take off a lot more once we occupy virtual spaces a little bit more. So that's why I was comparing it with those two apps, because I feel like the timing, the format, as it slightly evolves, is going to make it much more of a thing in the future. So that's just my general thoughts.
Look, we thought about it's a lot to unpack again, but let me try to start somewhere. I think we talked about this last time, that there are certain ideas that once the genie's out of the box, nobody's going to go back. So I think last time we talked about the fact that, you know, once you saw a digital camera taking a decent picture, nobody thought, it's like, oh, I really see a future where we will all go back into film. Because, you know, yes, the camera has the highest resolution or the latitude or whatever, but we can see that with a bit more work, there's something that we will not put back into the box. And the same thing happened, to me at least, with AI. And at one point when the AI art stuff happened, people were like, this is just some kids putting some prompt in. Yeah, but there's also a whole movement about it and the whole thing. And once we figure out how to do this properly, you know, the genie is not going to go back in the box. We're not going to go back to other ways of making stuff soon. Once it's there, then it continues. The next thing we do is NFTs. It's like, yeah, maybe by the time this is all, the dust has settled, we might even not even call them NFTs anymore. But the idea, because the ideas are not new. Like we've all been, not all, but we could own digital assets before. You could go to a, you know, insert game title here store and buy yourself a skin. That's a digital asset that you own. But you know, if certain game company decides that, you know, to scrap the game, you don't anymore. So the idea is nothing new. Like, it's the same thing with the metaverse. And I mean, we all played, like, you know, all multiplayer games before, which is kind of like that. It's just a new iteration of the same idea that bases itself on the new set of technologies, which are more ready to be consumed for the masses. And with NFTs, I think what the core essence is that you have, as you say, that you have a digital asset that you own, not somebody else's, that you own, and it is transferable. And I think that's the important part, that I could go, like, I think when we have the metaverse, I will be able to, a bit like in Ready Player One. So I think it's actually a really good concept in Ready Player One. That, you know, you make yourself a DeLorean with a Mickey Mouse, you know, thing on top with you know, and you yourself are, you know, a Power Ranger that sits in, that has a Ghostbusters blaster. Is because you own all those things, and you can make yourself your own identity, your own self-expression up, and you can move it from room to room to room. I can do this in Zoom. I can use this in insert game title here. I can go into a meeting, you go into virtual space. I can do all this stuff, and I am me, and I create myself, and I have my own digital version of myself, or my stuff, my digital stuff, whatever stuff is, you know, a sneaker, a car, or whatever, a dragon, doesn't matter. But I can take it along the ride. And I think that's the true essence of where this is all going to go. And is you can display it somewhere or not, like, or you can just show it to your friends, or you can sell it, and then once you sell it, then the whole, obviously, money comes in. And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just like, then the money comes in, and then you're in the same space as everybody else. It's like, as soon as you know, if you look into the real quote unquote art world, I mean, it's the same thing, that you could go into with an attitude and go into a modern art gallery and say, like, those 3 squares on a wall are not art, or are not, you know, why would I spend $500,000 or more on this when, you know, my 4-year-old could make those? You could have that attitude, but it's not really a very well educated attitude, and even to the point, because first of all, you try to make that and sell it for $500,000 and see how far you go. And second is, like, it's the stories and, you know, the stuff that counts most. So if you're able to tell a story with whatever medium or whatever expression you do, and people like it, then go do it.
But I think also, you know, I see why some people are very negative about it. And there's some reason to be, like, you know, there's some aspects of our culture that without NFTs, right? You know, I wouldn't personally, I wouldn't buy a shirt that says Supreme and it costs $5,000 on a t-shirt, and I wouldn't buy that thing. But some people
wouldn't
will
buy a baseball card or a Pokemon card that costs $500,000, but some people do.
Yeah, but those are the kind of examples that I think people who are very negative about the idea usually point out. They point out the very obvious examples. But when I think of it, and I think of it like how you kind of think of it, it's like, it might not even be called NFT in the future. It's just virtual ownership of digital goods. And I think that from an artist's perspective, not having to necessarily work directly for an employer, and also being able to contribute to an economy with some kind of value that people want. Like if you can create virtual goods for people or virtual environments for people, things that people actually enjoy and will use, and you'll get paid for it, as you should, because you should get paid for your labor. You should get paid for your time if you put a lot of time into it. I think that would be kind of inspiring for some people to think that that sort of system may exist in the future. So I don't know. I'm generally optimistic about the future of virtual ownership, for those reasons.
It's just that suddenly we are beneficial. I mean, by we, I say my VFX, my royal we of visual effects, because I mean, we have done this or at least I have done this for almost 20 years now, like making digital assets and putting them into movies and whatever. So the idea that we make that it might be weird for people who have, you know, for who people have no idea about that kind of world, but people who work in games and visual effects are like, look, we've made digital assets for a long time now, and we've sold our time and our labor to people that like our pixels. That's good. The question is, you know, now it's just different because suddenly you, as in like you out there who just goes to the movies and doesn't think about it, suddenly is able to buy a piece of my art. Do you like it? Do you want it? Do you think it's cool or not? Maybe somebody will. Do you like the fact that I could potentially make, you know, $64 million by, you know, by selling some art like people did? Like the guy made a piece of art every day for like how many years? Like that's a lot of time. Like, is it worth $65 million? It's up to you. But you know, there's lots of people get a lot of money for stuff that I not necessarily, you know, that you could question if it's the right to earn that amount of money. But you could definitely not tell him that he's not putting enough effort in. And that's all it is. Like, we just have to understand that there is a I think it's a general society thing. There's a rift going on where lots of, you know, before more homogeneous, or at least homogeneous seeming entities like people groups are scattering into small sub communities of people who like this and who like this. You know, if you look at my Discord, it's like 70 different Discord servers, which might overlap, which might not, but that's me, that's my interests. And I feel like I can be a part of this community and that community and this community and still interact with those people. Again, jump around with my assets.
But you
present
know
myself and then work that way, and also work that way. That's the important part. Like, yes, I work for a big company, but you know, I also want to be able to work with a community, or work with you know, give my time to this or give my time to that and receive something back. And I think that's cool. And if you fast forward, I think I've said this before, it's like, it's going to be interesting for especially large companies that make content is what they're doing, because you know, nothing stops us of either forming our own entities that just, you know, are making those goods or those digital goods, or going straight to a client, you know, leaving out 4 steps in the middle, getting paid with a royalty scheme where I, you know, get paid for what's actually used. I think we said that before. Like, should I if I model Iron Man, should I be paid every time Iron Man appears on somebody's screen, you know, $0.00001, and you know, that's how I get paid. Initially, I just put my work in for free. Everybody wins, and I don't think that's a bad future to be in. It's just different, and I think different change scares people, and that's when you have people, it brings out the best and the worst in people. So you have great projects that are really inspiring and really new and really innovative, and you have people who still sit back and think it's all shit and I'm scared and I don't know what this is, and I don't get it. And it's okay, because it's different and it's weird, and it takes even, you know, people who are in this space quite a long time to understand all the quirks and ins and outs of it. But once those go away, and once there's layers on top of this where it's easier to understand and to interact with it, you know, right now you have to do this thing where you have to get this wallet, and then you have this phrase, and then you have to remember it, and what the heck, and then I have to have a MetaMask. What is a MetaMask? Browser extension? How do I use it on my phone? Like, it's also, you know, you have to do those magic spells, and suddenly you have an NFT. It's still at this point way too complicated for most people. So
for sure,
once that
I think that's one
drops
part
away
of it. Yeah, once the usability increase, like it's like you know, Bitcoin used to be hard to buy, right? It was
it's like 90
going like Kraken,
like
there's all these verification, and then, you know, something like Robinhood came along, people bought it. And it was very, very simple, one button, very simple. And like, that's the thing, all these systems are way too overcomplicated. But before we go on that, I want to comment on one thing you said, which was like virtual communities. And that's actually one of the topics I want to talk about, because I feel like this is a big part of something that, which is like virtual communities. And that's actually one of the topics I want to talk about, because I feel like this is a big part of something that some people are obviously thinking about this. People that are really in that space are thinking about it. But I feel like, you know, when the bandwidth of communication goes down, like we have Discord right now, we have Zoom right now, and sort of limited the interaction that we can like have. And that's why I think like Twitter Spaces and these sort of like, at least going from like text to voice has been interesting, because ideas are just shared at a higher rate. And I've gone in a lot of VR spaces before and just talked to people, and you meet people in there. It's really interesting experience, because you're not through even though it looks silly on video, in VR, it's actually a pretty compelling experience where you feel like you're actually there with people. And I feel like, you know, in terms of virtual communities and sort of digital identity, you know, when you look at something like the most popular NFT project, and I can't speak in detail about it, but it's an example that maybe everybody would know. It's like the Bored Ape Yacht Club, right? And everyone bought these pictures, but they're all part of something. It's almost like, you know, humans represent themselves through symbols. We do this right now. We have nations, we have countries, you know, we have flags that we identify with. We identify with subgroups within those countries. And I think those virtual tribes, kind of tribalism that humans naturally kind of sway into, is going to become much more prominent on the internet. And right now, there's no format, there's no system that is there's Facebook communities and groups, but it's not that much of a community. The old internet had like internet forums where you kind of had stuff like that, like kind of small communities and niches. But I feel like a more evolved version is what's coming, a much more evolved version, where instead of like commenting on a YouTube video, you know, you can hop in with 30 or 40 or 50 people in a virtual space and just talk and actually engage and actually build relationships with people. And I feel like that's the part that's really interesting to me is that sort of hopping in virtual spaces, having a collective, you know, like you said, you can make money through those communities and you can do community projects. So not only is there a social element, but there's also a financial element that a community can operate within its best interest together. So 100 people in a virtual community can operate. It's almost like a company. It's almost like a gig-based sort of economy, but also like a company. You could produce something with 100 people in a virtual community. So, you know, like value is being created from these community from the communities.
As you said, it's nothing new to this concept. Like you know, it's like we all, you know, tribalism and identity politics, good or bad, is not my place to judge. Is a thing that's there. I mean, we had a quite interesting political couple of years with you know, the rise of certain groups that we wouldn't thought otherwise would have done it, and it comes through that. It comes from like those kind of alternative needs of alternative form of expressions, and it doesn't matter if it's like the metaverse can be a WhatsApp group chat. That's the metaverse if you think about it. Like, it can be just that. It is true though that it through technology, it makes it easier for people in a global stage to get together over whatever their thing is that they get together. It is in a way scary though as well at the same time. Like, I don't want to be again the devil's avocado of everything, but I feel like it's interesting to see that anonymity and those kind of scattered communities not necessarily bring out the best in people.
Right. Do you think it'll increase conflict potentially or something?
I mean, it's so powerful and so good in some places, and it's so negative in others, and I think that's just inherently human. It's just amplified. Like, it doesn't matter if you're like in the Celtic tribes. There were probably people who like really like working together and building stuff, and there were other people who like to go around, rape and pillage and expand that way. And it's obviously we have a multiple layers of societal norms on top of that, but there's still different strokes for different folks, I guess. And then we just have to, what I think we have to make sure is that we don't forget the moral aspect of this. And I think that's where it's interesting to see if suddenly AI does a lot of our jobs in creative and uncreative or not so creative fields. Where are people left in this point, and what are people doing? Are they just hanging out in the metaverse and getting silly, or are we trying to through some sort of basic support for everybody, getting everybody in the same boat, and actually create some sort of amazing future utopian society where everybody's kind of frolicking in the fields and talks about ways to engage? I don't know, but my point at least is to stay positive about this, because it's very quick, especially in the current time, with everything from climate change to the rise of certain political elements, to get very negative quite quickly. And then then this NFT thing happens, and this other stuff happens, and it's all very dark quite quickly. I think we need to make sure we invest the time to help people understand. And I think knowledge is power. So if lots of the uneducated, quote unquote, stupid comments are out there, if you rather than being negative about them, so you're all idiots, if you start to try to educate people and try to bring them in a boat, be passionate about what you're doing, I feel like they understand and they see that, and they come along with you for the ride. At least that happened to me. Like, lots of people in my surrounding were like, this NFT stuff is stupid. And then you talk a bit more, and you're not trying to condemn them and say, yes, it can be stupid, I agree with you, and then you build it upon there. I think that's very important. I mean, we're far away from VFX now, but I just think the funny thing is that the spotlight over the last couple of years came up a lot on VFX, because I always use VFX for like 3D or digital image generation, because even tech companies and everybody needs 3D content made. Everybody from a Google to an Apple to whatever, everybody needs some sort of, suddenly our experience is actually needed in a larger space.
This is something I really want to point out too, is like, I also kind of went in the NFT space and just try to create a few pieces and kind of experiment. Usually my approach towards things in general is like, I'm going to move in this direction and not have the idea fully formed, and I'm just going to move in this direction. And as I'm moving in a direction, usually as I think about things and kind of get new information, is this a good direction or is it not a good direction? Or what more have I learned about this sort of thing? And I feel like you can only learn so much by kind of reading things versus like actually engaging with people or kind of building something. So you actually have to kind of do stuff to actually gather that information. So that was kind of the experiments that I had done, and that actually led to more of the commercial side of NFT stuff. And this is where I think visual effects artists would be interested to hear is like, this was in between contracts, between normal kind of contracts that I take, but I had done some very, very short contracts. My wife and I, she was doing some virtual sculpting, and I was like remeshing and doing some pieces for companies. And it's actually not released, that project yet, but it is like a really big company, like millions of followers, really big company. And they needed this, and it's not in the visual effects industry at all. And so, by the way, you can charge essentially the typical studio rate, the actual freelancer rate, not the sort of typical hourly rates that you might charge at a visual effects studio, because there's no margin that has to be made off of the hourly rate. So basically you can charge more is what I'm saying. And so your skills are actually valued very, very high to these companies who need these digital things created. And it's just interesting to maybe throw the idea out there. Hey, there is this market that's developing, maybe in the very immature stage that it was in, and nobody knew what it was. So of course there's random projects and all these crazy stuff happening, but ultimately it's just a vehicle. And I think of NFTs as sort of like, it's a package that you can put something inside of it and hand it to somebody else. And that's really all it is. It's a technology. It's not, people associate it so strongly to the JPEG stuff, or just like a JPEG of a specific project. And they're not really thinking of like that it's a virtual object being transferred to somebody else. And I feel like
it's even more than that, because it is a smart contract that is in the blockchain, and a smart contract is an immutable immutable piece of code that you can run. There can be anything. It can be, yes, it's very easy to have a 2x2 grid of 3 colors. It's not that of three color channels. That's a very easy thing to store. You could, there's whole artworks that are basically just an HTML canvas, and then you have a whole game implemented in your art. Have some artwork on your wall, which is Snake. See what I mean? Like, like, because it's just a piece of code that runs, and then you get the result back. And if it's a picture, great. If it's whatever, like it is way more. And I think that's when that clicks in people. They're like, the JPEG is just the first thing that everybody does. It's the simplest thing. And then sometimes they don't even store the JPEGs in a decentralized way, and then you have a decentralized contract
it's actually
that points to an AWS instance of a JPEG. It's like, it's completely silly. But again, I'm not against that. Like, if people, that's the first way to explore it, cool, explore it, do it. It's fine with me. Just to pick up on your thought there, I feel the same way, like, and I'm pretty sure. Sorry if I'm assuming, but I'm pretty sure that the work you did for said company for the project it isn't released yet was easier than your day job, and you got paid more. And I'm not saying it's just because it's like, if you're an artisan coffee maker and you suddenly get hired at Starbucks, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that your skills that you acquired for the last 20 years, how to make the perfect cup of coffee, which takes you 20 minutes to make. If you go to Starbucks, you follow a recipe, and they're at the early stages of this, and you just push a button, and if you get paid more for that, why wouldn't you do it?
Well, what was really fun about it, and my wife, she's a traditional artist, so we like to work together on stuff. And she has like a fashion design, she has like physical skills.
You're describing
my illustration.
It's just very funny because you're describing my wife as well at the same time.
Cool. Oh, really?
It's very similar.
So she has, but I kind of introduced her to like the VR headset, and she was like better than I was, because she has those. She's built sculptures and stuff in like real life. She likes using her hands and stuff. So like she was just like instantly really good at it. But what was interesting about that company that came to us was it was more like a commission than like sort of like, I'm going to tell you exactly what this needs to be. It's more like, hey, you're an artist. We're going to hire you as an artist. And that was really cool, because it was like, to have that level of creative freedom to come up with drafts and designs and submit those drafts and have that sort of dynamic, and then give them something. And it wasn't micromanaged. So it was a really nice experience, and really creative, just ideas flowing and stuff we got to do. It's just a different way. And you're not signing through a 1099 and this sort of, if you have a very large amount of money in a long-term contract, maybe you do more of a legal contract. We weren't really even doing official contracts. We're just doing like, hey, this is like a week. This is a week of work or something like that. Very, very short time periods. And it was just one after the other, these very short. So your risk is very low. Because if you don't get paid, you only don't get paid for a week. And then these are very big companies anyway, so you're going to get paid. So I don't know. That was the experience with it. And it changed my perspective on it, because I saw like, hey, these are really reputable big companies that are going to release this. And there are a lot of big companies that are doing this. So there must be something there, and it's worth just taking the second consideration, even if the NFT is not the final form. As this evolves, I'm willing to place chips on the fact that people will find value in virtual goods and ownership of virtual goods. And I think that's ultimately what the conversation is about. I think, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is
goods and ownership of virtual goods. And I think that's ultimately what the conversation is about. I think, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like, you're absolutely right. Like the value is, and it's already been proven before. Like we already had, people make a living out of making Counter-Strike skins, and stuff like this. Like
the whole
like,
modding community,
yeah, exactly. It's nothing new. It's again, none of those. Most of new technology is just taking something that's already there and looking at it from a different angle, and I think that's and making it better. And I think that's the same thing with the whole NFT stuff. I just like the fact that I can send you something I made, whatever something is, and you send me something in return, whatever something is that you sent me in return. So I think that's, I mean, it's the base of an economy. It's a base of doing it right, and we can. I think that's a good thing. We can agree on that, and whatever it's going to mean for us in our daily life is also going to be very interesting, because I don't understand, for example, why we couldn't all send. It's pick Marvel because they're big. Just like why could we send our work to Marvel as an NFT? So it's like it's clear who did what, how much, when, and it's in a standard format that we can all agree on, rather than. And it's open. I think that's the good part as well. It's like I'm all for openness, and so like I can look up your wallet address and see what happened there.
Yeah.
And yes, you can have a second wallet and your third one or whatever.
It's such a paradigm shift, though. Yeah, it's so when you think of it at scale like that, at scale, the idea it's a huge paradigm shift of the way everything's operating.
It's like openness and transparency in this case. It's like people are like, oh, don't talk about money, and I'm like, I think it's okay to know that, you paid this guy this much and I should get the same, or for this guy who didn't get the same claim that I got to. See, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It's a bad thing if you want to cheat, but if you don't, then it's not necessarily a bad thing. And it's the same thing with like paying taxes. It's like if you all agree on we pay X amount of tax fairly, then you just here's my wallet, just take it. And leave me be, and that make it easy, and we all agree on, and we get the right thing out of it. But there's no like
ambiguity,
and that's if you think about it through, that's the start of being fair. Full stop. That means you can also be fair to say like, look, there's a UBI, and everybody gets a basic, and you can get more, but everything is clear and open and understood, and that leaves you time to build the future, because you have to, because soon more and more jobs will go away. And I'm not saying they go away because they go overseas. They will go away to nobody who needs a roof above their house. And then what happens? Like, I'm worried for my 3 and 7 year old kids to what they do. First of all, they're never going to have to learn how to drive a car, which is interesting if you think about it. A 3-year-old now, it's like, why would they ever 15 years from now, when they're supposed to drive a car, I'm pretty sure they won't need to do that. That's what if you extrapolate that thought, it's like what things that they wouldn't,
even the things that they're growing up with is just crazy to think about. I grew up with I was on the end of like the dial-up era, like the end of it, where it was like first computer was like a Gateway box. I don't know if you remember the company Gateway. It came in these giant cow boxes, looked like a cow pattern. And now it's like kids are growing up with, like I said in the previous recording we did, like gravity sketches. This is virtual Legos. Like you can literally just assemble things in virtual space. Like their skills are going to be, we're going to be like the grandparent people that are just so, it's going to change so much.
Absolutely. Really, and they can meet online properly. They can, but it's crazy if you think about it. But at the same time, they have a time where there is the planet's going to, pardon my French, but going to shit, and there's stuff that happens, and water is a problem, so energy is a problem, all those kind of things. So it's gonna be interesting, to say the least, and of how that goes. And it's just interesting that suddenly some people who used to make like dragons for movies are able to even sitting at the table where those kind of conversations are made, which I think is obviously cool.
Yeah.
But it's just everything changes a bit to the whole virtual side of things, which is a good thing if you do it the right way. I'm just really trying to constantly ask myself, whatever I put out there, whatever tool I'm making, do we do it with the right intention? And that's not always easy, because especially like, I'm not sure how you work, but for me as an artist, as my artist persona, I'm the technologist technically, and that's where I'm good at. So it's always a bit like, hey, I found this piece of shiny technology, now I make an art piece out of it. Like, it's not necessarily that I'm sitting here for hours and conceptualizing an art piece and then just like picking the right technology. I mean, I do that in my day job by, having somebody else tell me, and then I find the right technology. But if I express myself, it's more like, hey, cool, I found this. Look what I can make out of it. And that you just tend to stay in your box and be a bit like,
well, it's experimental,
one-sided.
Well, that's what I like about it too, is like or just my own like side projects. Like, one of the reasons, actually one of the biggest motivations for me doing this channel is simply to allow myself to have more time to do side projects. That's actually one of the largest motivations, because I like learning new things constantly and just trying to figure out ways to use them. And if there's ways to monetize your time while you're doing that, I think it's a good idea, because then you have more time to reinvest into those things and acquire more skills. The more you can invest in your own skills and experiment, I think it's always those are always good directions. But I think
I'm very happy that, or very lucky that in the place that I am with Frame Stories, that it's not only encouraged, but it's kind of mandatory for me to be that person, because I need to find new ways of thinking and then share them with people, and then trying to find out what works and what doesn't. And and the only way to do this for me is by exploring things, and you're learning by doing. Like, I could sit here and read papers all day long or whatever, but it's not hard. That's not how you figure things out. You need to go into Midjourney and make some art, or connect or connect DALL-E with Nuke and see how it works, and then see if you can do a project, like all those kind of things. And it's cool, because I think that's what's needed to really explore the space. And it's like a creative reimagination of how all these technologies could work together, but also breaking them on purpose and like chopping off something and see what's underneath, and those kind of attitudes are important. And it's again nothing new. Like, what the first time we got a ray tracer out and it was super slow, I was one of the people who like really got into it with a friend of mine, and we really tried to render everything with Maxwell back in the days. And it was like, everybody else is like, are you guys insane? This is stupid. We all rendering with Render Man and it's faster. Like, but you're 17 people and I'm one, and like we deliver a whole commercial and we're one person.
I think,
and we have the machines do the work, and yes, it worked for this case.
That's I think I see really a parallel to what you're saying, which is there are very established systems of like first principle approaches. Like, this is the way we're going to approach a problem, and like being able to step outside of that big machine and taking that new thing, even though it doesn't fit into that established system, is really interesting. Because I do believe as cost goes down, I do believe a team of 5 or 10 artists could get together virtually and have some kind of studio and produce very high quality content at a very low cost, because of just the way they approach problems by using some of the new techniques.
And because they are 5 people and 50 or 1,500 virtual entities that they have trained up or created or whatever. Like for the current NFT project that I'm doing, there is we have now made a virtual artist called Jeff, who is part of our group, and Jeff's on the dunks.xyz website as one of the artists. Jeff is called Jeff because Jeff named himself Jeff. Like, I have a bunch of AI things that work together where I do stuff like I take a prompt, I create a prompt, I feed it into another thing. Cool. So at one point we were like, what's that thing called? So should we make a Twitter account, or should we at least in the dunks, in the crypto in the DALL-E punks Twitter, we need to say what it is. So I just asked this stack that I have here, and I was like, what's your name? Like, what is the artist called behind the project? And there was and I asked it to give me 10 names.
Yeah.
And there were the first 9 were like, the virtuoso creator, or the super crazy stupid name long thing that I'm really not into. And then number 10 was just Jeff. Okay, cool. Hi, Jeff. Nice to meet you. You know Jeff the artist, and you're on Twitter. And now this cool thing is now we have Jeff the artist, and again with the use of AI storytelling and ourselves, or a group of people, Jeff's interacting with people out there. Jeff's on Twitter. You can follow Jeff the artist.
That's crazy. That's crazy to think about. It's like there's going to be literally entities that you can interact with, like
yeah, and Jeff's there, and Jeff does comments on. Jeff makes art for people. Jeff asks questions. Jeff has polls. Jeff went to Paris on the weekend and discovered cafes in Paris. I made AI art of Jeff selfieing in Paris, and then because he's virtual, tomorrow he can be in Toronto or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. But we created this entity, and it's like that's the glue between projects. That's the studio of the future, because suddenly, Jeff could work on a movie tomorrow, or Jeff could make a short movie, or Jeff could make another NFT collection. But it's the kind of the Jeffness of things.
But it's really weird to think about. Yeah, because each model will have its own. If everything, like, let's say you have like a base AI that's created and splits off into hundreds of different directions, and the way that people train these things into different things are almost like their own mind.
That is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Like Jeff constantly explores new things. It's just me, adding to it, adding new technology to it, adding new data sets to it, trying to connect more things together. And suddenly Jeff thinks about other stuff, Jeff explains other stuff. Sometimes it's storytelling from me and others. Sometimes it's collaborative storytelling between the computers. Sometimes it's literally just what the name is just what the machine says. I mean, the art is prompt based. Sometimes it's Photoshop, sometimes maybe it's not. It's a whole story, new way of telling a story, and also utility, because the only way to get on the list to mint our new next collection early is if Jeff follows you. So if you interact with Jeff, if you have a conversation with him, Jeff will follow you, and that means you're on the VIP pre-sale list. So before we mint, we just look who Jeff follows, and those are the people who are on the list. So it's like, imagine that.
But it's super interesting. It's those virtual like AI persona, but there's also like these metaverse. That's interesting to think about. I hadn't thought about that. There's going to be artificial personas just walking around sort of in these virtual I mean, this is probably distant future, but there's a guy on YouTube who does like Unreal Engine. He like occupies like a puppet. I don't know if you've seen this guy. It's like Blue. He's called Blue. Have you seen this guy? He like puts on a Unreal suit, and he has like,
it does. Virtual influencers are a thing. There's like Michaela was one of the first ones, but there's Japanese one, Immigram or whatever. Like, there's on Instagram, there's already virtual people that make real money by wearing virtual or non-virtual Gucci bags or whatever, and and presenting them to the world. And Michaela was in a commercial. I mean, it was like obviously it's VFX and stuff,
but it's weird because it's like a brand, right? Yeah, it's still like some kind of a brand, or like you associate something to it. Like you could have, companies have brands, right? And they represent themselves through that sort of what they represent. But it's weird to think that there will be virtual people representing ideas but they're still, that's really, really weird to think about.
It's bizarre. It's bizarre in a way, but also good, because that's the way it works. And but again, it's nothing new. Like basically what I'm doing is we make Jeff as a brand. And the cool thing is, in this case, it's a bit unpredictable, because it's a brand that has a way of expressing itself, and it's an entity that's not completely controlled. It's just it has inputs by a group of people, but it's still expressing itself by algorithmic craziness, hence the name. It's really the future of how you can interact with stuff. I mean, there's now nothing stopping you of having I keep using Marvel for an example. I don't know why, but nothing stops you of having Thor on Twitter.
He is that, but they're still, that's really, really weird to think about.
It's bizarre. It's bizarre in a way, but also good, because that's the way it works. And but again, it's nothing new. Like basically what I'm doing is we make Jeff as a brand. And the cool thing is, in this case, it's a bit unpredictable because, you know, it's a brand that has a way of expressing itself, and it's an entity that's not completely controlled. It's just, you know, it has inputs by a group of people, but it's still expressing itself by, you know, algorithmic craziness, hence the name. It's really the future of how you can interact with stuff. I mean, there's now nothing stopping you of having I keep using Marvel for an example. I don't know why, but you know, nothing stops you of having Thor on Twitter, and you know, but rather than it being just, you know, a bunch of writers in a room, it could actually be the essence of Thorness programmed into a network that can express itself, and then let it free roam and see what happens. Wow. It's a bit I mean, it's cool. Like I think it's a very, very, very good thing, because, for example, with my AI art, I'm really into alternative counterfactual history, or doing stuff that you couldn't otherwise do. I'm not sure if we talked about it last time, so if I repeat myself, stop me. But like making AI art to go back in time, like show me a picture of the French Revolution, like an actual photo. So it's like if you do history in school, like imagine
it's like an artist rendition almost, or something. But like,
exactly,
I can imagine,
but imagine the history class again of my now 3-year-old, you know, when they're in high school, and then they're like, let's see how it looked like. Show me a picture of the French Revolution. And then I was like, oh, zoom in over there, or move over there, like, and suddenly the teacher has actual pictures to visualize something. And we all know that visual learning works better than just reading it. So if you have if you associate a picture that is somewhat real, obviously not a real photo, but it's real enough to, you know, if it quacks like a duck and looks like a duck, it might as well be a duck. Like you could then, you know, from there you go to somewhere else and somewhere else and somewhere else. It's a new way of exploring the you know, the past, but also counterfactuals. Obviously, like I have a little project where I'm doing behind the scenes of movies. So I basically use Jeff and my AI Jeff system to make behind the scenes pictures of movies that never have been there. Like, and then I post them on social media and ask people, what do you think this movie is based on the behind the scenes picture? And it's really fun. And I might actually make a little website soon about it.
I think it's like, I think you said that one last time, but I remember. It's
cool because, you know, it allows you to kind of see other stuff.
You know what's interesting as well, we're saying the time we're recording this right now is September 11th. In a month, I think, is when Meta is releasing their next VR headset, which is going to be supposedly a much higher quality outside camera for pass-through kind of video, so you can overlay virtual objects into the real world in a much higher resolution than ever before, really. And like you know, I know you have a few minutes left here, but, you know, it's like we're compositors. So like, I was always obsessed with the idea of merging the real with the virtual. And now that is like happening on steroids. Like this is it's only a few weeks out that I think we'll see a pretty big leap, and then the competition from other companies coming in as well. So we're right before this all is coming. So these ideas might sound out there to some people, and this is like sci-fi nonsense, but I you know, some of it's maybe longer term, but you know, I don't know. Basically, with the language models and the vision models that we've seen, all that coming together, I don't think it's this sci-fi nonsense anymore. So interesting to think about how to navigate this environment.
If you would have asked me even 5 years ago, will I be able to make a somewhat convincing picture just by talking to a computer? I was like, no, what the fuck are you talking about? Of course, not in the future. At one point, maybe. But now, and
I think it's like 20 years out. You know, that sounds like crazy far.
And then 2 years ago, 2 years ago, when I started my first prompt-based stuff, I was like, oh my God, it works, kind of.
I mean, there's already a 3D model one now. There's already a 3D modeling one. I can't remember the name. There's one on YouTube. You can type it's text to 3D model. I mean,
there's also one where I'm not sure, I haven't read the paper enough, but it came out from Apple, where you can say walk down the stairs, and it's like It goes down this, like, I think it's based on architectural,
where it's kind of walking into the picture, kind of like it looks at a picture.
No, it's like architecture stuff. So you can say, you're somewhere you can say, like, you know, oh, this is a living room with a table and whatever, and then you say, now walk down the stairs, and it really walks down the stairs. And I saw this, and it's like, this is cool. Again, you know, I said it before,
there was one they tied into Unreal Engine. They showed, I forget the company name, but they tied in, you type. So basically, instead of, like, let's say you're using Unreal and you want to make some forest, instead of placing all the trees manually, it studied the way that either artists place trees, but it also looked at, like, I think, like, photographs of trees, like the way that foliage clusters together. So rather than, like, randomly placing trees, what you think a forest will look like, it intelligently looks at the pattern and say, hey, I want this type of woods, and it will scatter those objects, not just kind of randomly on vertices, but actual with the terrain of what these landscapes could be. And you could just generate different environments in 3D space in Unreal Engine and get all these variations. And that's how you would do it anyway in real life. It's like, I always said, like, I was never interested in modeling a rock. I was always interested in, like, filming a scene. Like, I always, like, had that filmmaker background and interest. And I feel like the way we approach things as filmmakers, we go out into the woods, we find a place and we film in that place and we find the angles, versus, you know, having to place every single tree and everything. You know, I think, yeah, it's just
especially if you're a programmer, you see an opportunity to make your life easier, you take it. Now but it's also happened, like, there's Blender add-ons now that are really good. I tested one the other day where you can for textures, you just say, like, a mossy or like a rusted pipe texture, and then it just does it. And then you just, you know, because in Blender you just, like, type some prompts, and then you have a textured model. Is it perfect? It looked good enough for me. And imagine that way of creating. You'll be like, it's interesting because the job title of a prompt designer or a whatever prompt engineer, that it keeps actually popping up on my LinkedIn feed now. So it's like, it's actually a job now. It's a job now to make prompts, to figure out prompts for things.
There's a website called Prompt Base. You can sell your prompts for $2. If you have a specific wording that you figured out, you can sell your words basically to other people, which is, I found that really interesting.
It's crazy. Like, I have to find it, but I'm starting to look into different algorithms that actually allow you to. One second. It's a let me find it. There's a bunch of algorithms out there that basically allow you to do, I think, what's called disassociated press algorithms, which are Markov chain based algorithms that actually may take text and re-scramble them, so you can kind of, but they stay in the same realm.
Right.
So what that means is you can diversify your prompts, basically. So you can take a prompt and have it and merge it with another one and have another one come out, and then generate a bunch of them and then have art create based on that automatically. That's what I like. I like the whole pipeline ability thing. So it's like I start with 3 prompts and then have some first part of Jeff makes multiple prompts, and then there's art coming out and then presented to a human in a website where you can vote on, and then it goes back into Jeff, and then Jeff gets better, and like all this kind of stuff. That's kind of really
the speed is going to increase. I mean, look at the speed that we're hitting a button and waiting 30 seconds for pictures and stuff. I think that it'll be like NVIDIA Canvas at some point, with at least for the pictures. It'll be like you're painting it and it's just instant generation. So the speed is going to increase dramatically, but be able to get words and intelligent AIs that can create better words, and having that feedback in, like you're saying, I think that loop will get a lot faster as well. So, like, you know, if you could generate 10,000 pictures in 5 seconds, you know, versus, like, you know, let's say you spend 10 hours on Midjourney all day and you try to make a bunch of pictures. If you could generate 10,000 and just find the best ones, I think the AIs will help us find the best ones. That's what I'm saying. Like, we're searching right now, we're trying to find them, but I think that process will get easier too, of finding the good ones. So yeah, it's all super fascinating. I know we're at an hour here, so I don't want to take too much of your time. I think you're.
Sorry, I have to go. If you want to continue this conversation about other stuff, I'll get some feedback from your channel, and then we can.
Cool.
Rejigger.
Yeah, awesome. I appreciate it. Yeah, your time and everything, and very interesting conversation. Johannes Saam. All right. Thanks, man.
Cool. Take it easy, guys. Bye.